The Figure in the Shadows by John Bellairs, Chapter 9. It was December now, and everyone in New Zebedee was getting ready for Christmas. Big tinsel-covered balls were strung across Main Street in several places, and the fountain at the traffic circle was turned into a nativity scene. Jonathan lugged the Seagrams and the Oxidol bottles down from the attic and began unsnarling the Christmas tree lights. They had been put away in neat little bundles, but they had somehow gotten all knotted up while lying quiet in their boxes. It happened that way every year. Jonathan and Mrs. Zimmerman began their usual argument about which was better, a tall, skinny tree or a short, squat one. Louis unpacked the dirty cotton batting and arranged it around the circular mirror that was supposed to be the ice pond. He set up a little cardboard village with cellophane windows and put the celluloid deer out on the ice. Then, when the tree was all decorated and the lights were turned on, Louis would sit on the couch and squint. He did this to make the tree lights into stars, red and blue and green and white and orange stars, each with 4 long rays. Louis liked the effect, and he would sit there squinting for long periods of time. Every night, as he undressed for bed, Louis would look at the green streak on his neck. It had been left there by the tarnished chain that held the magic 3-cent piece. The magic amulet was gone forever. He knew it was gone. Rosarita had told him so. She had told him that she dropped it down the sewer, and he had believed her. Now he was trying hard to feel good about not having the amulet. He was trying hard, but it was no use. Louis felt the way people feel when they give up something they like, something that is bad for them, like Mounds bars or eating between meals. He felt a big, empty space in his life, a hollow place cut out of his insides. Sometimes he woke up in the middle of the night, scrabbling frantically for the amulet. But when he found it, it wasn't there. He burst into tears. But Louis went about his everyday life as well as he could. He was distracted from his troubles by the Christmas preparations and the fun he had playing with Rosarita. He was happy a good deal of the time, and he might have eventually forgotten all about the amulet if something bad hadn't happened to him. It was a dark December afternoon. Louis and the other 6th grade students were trying very hard to finish their math assignments so they could be let out early. Miss Haggerty walked up and down the aisles looking at papers and offering comments. When she was on the other side of the room, Woody Mingo started pinching Louis. "Ow!" Louis hissed. "Cut it out, Woody." "Cut what out?" "You know what I mean. Stop pinching me." "I ain't pinching you. It must be a sweat bee. Take a bath and they won't sting you. Sweat bee, Barney smell, sweat bee, Barney smell, pinch, pinch." Louis felt deep despair. It was as if Woody had begun to realize that the amulet was gone. For a long time after their big fight, Woody had let Louis alone, but in the last few days he had started in again. It was worse than before. Louis wanted to slug Louis, but he knew. Louis wanted to slug Woody, but he knew he'd get caught if he tried anything. Besides, he wasn't sure he could hurt Woody at all without his amulet. Why did he ever agree to give it away? It was one of the dumbest things he had ever done in his life. Miss Haggerty walked in to the front room and picked up her watch. "Class," she said. Everyone stopped working and looked up. "Since you all seem to be doing quite well, I will keep my promise and let you out early. Some of you are not quite finished, but you may complete your work at home. Now, as soon as you have your desks all cleared off and the room is quiet, you may go." Desktops slammed all over the room as the students began stuffing their pencils, paper, and books into their desks. Louis put all his books away, and then started stuffing his pens and pencils down the hole that the ink bottle sat in. The students in Louis's class didn't get to use ballpoint pens. Not in school, at any rate. Ballpoint pens were supposed to be bad for your handwriting, so everybody had to write either with fountain pens or with wooden pens, the kind that have metal points on the end. The ink the students used was kept in glass bottles which sat in round holes that had been cut in the upper right-hand corner of each desktop. The holes went right through to the inside of the desk, so if you took the bottle out, you could put things into your desk through the hole. Of course, it would really have been easier just to lift the hinged wooden lid of the desk, but you couldn't have told Louis that. Louis had about 4 pencils and a pen crammed into the hole. They were stuck against some books that were inside his desk, and they wouldn't go in. With his left hand, he jiggled them around, trying to force them in. In his right hand, he held the ink bottle. It dangled out over the aisle. Suddenly, something hit Louis's arm, right on the funny bone. His arm went numb, his hand went limp, and the ink bottle shattered on the floor. Black ink splattered everywhere. Louis turned angrily in his seat. Woody was just pulling himself hastily back behind his raised desktop, and now Miss Haggerty was standing next to Lewis's desk. "What seems to be the matter here?" "Woody knocked the ink out of my hand," said Lewis, pointing. Miss Haggerty did not seem to be interested in Woody. She kept staring at Lewis. "And what, may I ask, was the ink bottle doing in your hand, Mr. Barnevelt?" Lewis blushed. I was just putting my pencils down into the hole," he mumbled. The room was quiet, dead quiet. Everyone, including Rosarita, was looking at Lewis. Miss Haggerty turned to the class and said in a loud, clear voice, "Class, do we ever take the ink bottles out of our desks?" The class answered in long, drawn-out unison, "No, Miss Haggerty." Lewis's face burned. He felt angry and helpless. Now he heard Miss Haggerty telling him that he would have to stay after school and sand some of the ink off the floor. She didn't say how long it would take. An hour after everyone else had gone, Miss Haggerty let Lewis go. His fingertips were sore from sandpapering, and he was so mad he could hardly see straight. As he stomped along the sidewalk toward home, he felt mad at everybody and everything, but especially at Rosarita. It didn't matter that she had come over to his desk when the class was let out just to say she was sorry he had to stay after and to tell him that she hadn't chanted "No, Miss Haggerty" along with the rest of the class. That didn't matter. He was mad at her, and he felt that he had a very good reason. If he had had the amulet with him in school that day, Lewis figured, it would have protected him. Woody would have been afraid to pick on him. The ink bottle would never have gotten broken, and he would never have been forced to stay after school. And who had told him to get rid of the amulet? Rosarita. As Lewis saw it, everything that happened to him that day was Rosarita's fault. The more Lewis walked, the madder he got. Why did Rosarita have to butt in on everything anyway? If only he could get the amulet back. But how could he? It was gone forever, down the storm sewer. But now by now it had been washed out into Wilder Creek, and maybe even into Lake Michigan. It was no use. Lewis stopped dead in the middle of the street. He happened to be crossing a busy intersection at the time, so cars honked at him and drivers put on their brakes in a hurry to avoid hitting him. Lewis heard the brakes screeching and the horns honking, and he broke out of his trance long enough to get safely across the street. But when he was on the other side, he went right on thinking the thought that had made him stop. What if Rosarita still had the amulet? What if she had been lying when she said she dropped it down the sewer? The longer Lewis thought about it, the more certain he was that his wild guess was right. After all, he hadn't actually seen her drop the amulet down the drain. Maybe he had better try and get some information out of her. On Friday of that week, a boiler burst in the basement of Lewis's school. Everybody got out early. Lewis and Rosarita decided that they would spend the afternoon working on the Roman galley. It was nearly finished, but it needed a few final touches. The galley stood in the middle of Rosarita's desk, up in her room. Around it were balsa wood shavings, bits of cardboard, and globs of dried model airplane glue. Lewis sat at Rosarita's desk, hacking at a strip of balsa wood with his Boy Scout knife. He was trying to make a fancy battering ram to go on the prow of the ship. "Gosh darn!" Lewis threw the jackknife down and glared at it. Rosarita looked up from the book she was leafing through. "What's wrong?" "Oh, it's just this darned old knife. It wouldn't cut butter," Rosarita thought a minute. "Hey," she said, "why don't we get one of my X-Acto knives? I forgot all about them. They're in my bureau drawer." "Great, which drawer are they in? I'll get them out." Lewis pushed his chair back and got up. He went to the dresser and started opening drawers and looking in them. Rosarita jumped up and ran to stop him. "Come on, Lewis, hands off. That's my bureau and my own private stuff in there, and besides," she added, grinning, "you couldn't get into the right drawer anyway. It's locked. And I've got the only key to it, and I'm not going to tell you where it is. Now go out and stand in the hall and close the door behind you. It'll only take a minute." "Oh, okay," Lewis grumbled. He stomped out into the hall and slammed the door behind him. As he stood there, staring at the wallpaper, he thought, "Own private stuff, huh? I'll bet that's where you've got my amulet, right in there with your own private stuff, but don't worry, I'll get it back." A few minutes later, Rosarita let Lewis come back into the room. The bureau drawers were all closed as before, but the X-Acto knives were laid out on the desk. Lewis looked the tall black bureau up and down. Which drawer was it? It had to be one of the two up at the top, because they were the only ones that had locks. But how was he going to get in without a key? Rosarita saw Lewis was eyeing the bureau, and she began to get worried. "Come on, Lewis," she said, taking him by the arm. "There's nothing in there but my own stuff. Some of it I won't even let my mom look at, so don't feel too left out. Hey, let's get to work on the galley. Here, this is how the blades fit in the holders. Late that night, Louis lay awake, tossing and turning. He heard the grandfather clock in the study downstairs thud 1 o'clock, then 2, and then 3. Louis was trying to put together a plan for getting a look in the locked drawers of Rosarita's bureau. It was no use. Everything depended on his having the key, and he didn't have the faintest idea where to look for it. He thought of ransacking her room sometime when she was out, but he didn't see how he could do that without attracting her mother's attention, and he didn't want to make a mess. Everything would have to be done carefully and secretly so Rosarita would not realize what was going on. Louis was hoping the amulet would be tucked away in some dark corner of one of the 2 drawers. Some place Rosarita didn't look at very often. Louis grimaced. Maybe Rosarita checked the bureau every day, just to see if the amulet was there. Maybe he could have a fake one made. No, that sounded impossible. If he got the amulet away from her and she found out about it, it would just be too darned bad. And how was he going to get it? Louis thought about skeleton keys and midnight break-ins with rope ladders and black masks and tool bags and the works. Then he thought, gee, what if it's not in her bureau at all? What if she really did throw it away? In any case, he wasn't going to find out anything without the key in the drawer, without the key to the drawer. He didn't even know where to look for it. Louis got that hopeless feeling as the clock struck 4. He drifted off to sleep. That night, Louis dreamed about keys. He was wandering through the many rooms of an old junk shop, and every room was full to the ceiling with keys of all sizes and shapes. Some of them were hooked together on rings, but most were just piled loose on the floor. He searched and searched, but he couldn't find the one he wanted. And that's the end of chapter 9.